I'm not. All right. It didn't go over the edge, so.
All right, and the audio I'm getting from you sounds pretty good on Discord, so I have my backup.
I mean, it was only an audition that for some reason after I.
All right, I hit record and I went live.
All right. I didn't push any audio related stuff. All I did was I accidentally had scrolled down in the box of tracks.
I keep thinking like, oh, it'd be easier during quarantine. I'll just like go over there and teach you how to use Audition, so this will all be easier. But that literally can't happen.
Anyway, it seems fine.
All right, and we're live, so I'll just do this.
It's still doing that thing where the WAVs look droopy on the bottom.
That's an artifact of your preamp. Won't hurt anything, and also I could correct it, but
happening with the other things also.
Yeah,
no
I don't know.
What I do it.
I mean, that usually is an artifact of compression, but it can also be an artifact of DC bias. I do also remove the noise from your files. I'll show you a picture of it, but it doesn't hurt anything. But it's easy to remove. All right. It's Wednesday, December 23rd, 2020. I'm Rim.
I'm Scott.
And this is Geek Nights. Tonight we're talking about the last decade in animation and comics, 2010 to 2020. So, I figured because I'm stuck inside, I wanted to put up some fairy lights, some Christmas lights to out on the balcony. Normally, I don't even bother with that kind of thing. Like, there's enough Christmas going on around me, but I'm stuck inside. We had an ancient...
You see your lights. You're in the back facing nothing.
What? A million people see it. There's a giant muse. There's like 400 or 500 apartments that all have balconies facing my apartment.
So you're just showing it to the other building. You're not showing it to, like, the street.
No, I'm showing it to all the other people who have apartments in this whole complex. And to myself.
No one on the street can see it. Only people in this like.
Yeah, because I didn't want an apartment facing the street. There's cars honking out there.
I'm just saying, like, you're showing it to a very small number of people.
Yeah, like several hundred apartments full of people. Plus, it's for me. It's for me and Emily to look at. Like, I see the lights when I wake up in the morning, and they're out there.
You should hang them on the. If you wanted it for you should hang them on the other building.
Well, they're hanging on the balcony, so I see them out my window.
You could see them. It would be better to see ones on someone else's apartment.
Only one other apartment has put up lights in the whole complex.
Yeah, because it's silly to put them up on the inside part.
Why? That's where there's more people would see them there.
It's like if you had a house in a suburb and you only put your Christmas lights in the backyard.
No, because no one sees other people's backyards in a suburb.
Your neighbor in the back could see them.
No, because we always had privacy fences.
They could see them over the fence.
But I'm saying it's not like that at all, because there's a huge number of apartments that all see them. Like, most people have apartments facing inward, not outward in this neighborhood.
Anyway.
So I went and we had some ancient, like, regular Christmas lights. Like, the green string with the simple plug and that one particular light bulb. And I got them out.
Okay.
And half of the strand didn't light because, they're old, and that's the thing that can happen due to the way Christmas lights work.
Really shitty, and they weren't using, the modern ones, I think, have LEDs, so that doesn't happen.
Yeah. People still apparently mostly buy non-LED ones because LED ones are actually
cheaper.
Well, LED ones are expensive, or LED ones are dangerous bootleg nonsense.
What?
Most LED Christmas lights you can buy are the kind of thing that would be featured on Big Clive for catching fire. Good Lord, are they dodgy, like probably illegally imported shit?
It's not that hard to make one.
Yes, it is.
How hard could it be? I made an LED menorah. It's just fine.
So here's the main reason why these are a problem. One, they have to do voltage conversion. You can't just run them on the mains.
Yeah, you've got to put resistors on there, so
It's not resistors don't convert voltage, Scott.
Oh, you gotta turn it to DC first. And
you need logic in there. You need a bunch of stuff.
You just need logic. You just need you can take DC. You can actually use, if you powered it, what you could do that would work really well is, at the end of the cable, instead of having, a power cable, just have a USB.
Those exist. People sell those. They're really nice.
Yeah, and then you can then that's already done for you, because like you can just,
if you're putting Christmas lights indoors, that's like the perfect way to do it. Just get USB ones.
You can use whatever USB power you want, and then have a string of LEDs, right?
Just don't plug that shit into like a computer USB port, or you're gonna be in for a bad time.
You would take like your phone charger and plug it into that, right?
So basically, the problem with LED lights is that most of them are like UL has never seen these things before. These things are imported dodgily. And even though they often say that they are waterproof, the reality is most of those LED Christmas lights are not even close to waterproof because while the lights are all waterproof, at the cable that plugs into the wall will have some sort of transformer in it and then a box that has the circuitry to do things like change the colors and stuff. And those things aren't waterproof at all. Like, they're dodgy and not safe for outdoor usage. And if you want ones that actually do work nicely outdoors and are safe, they're like $40 a strand.
Oh yeah, it's not, I know people like they'll light their pools with LEDs, right? And there's like underneath the pool there'll be like little domes with LEDs under them. And it's like that shit ain't cheap. That pool's expensive enough already.
Yeah. So basically I got one. I got the smallest strand of lights I could to put up out there. And they were expensive because I got ones that are actually waterproof, actually designed for outdoors, had a UL logo on them that didn't look like it was bootlegged. And they'll probably last the rest of my life. And they're using like no power. It's actually kind of amazing how little power they use compared to even half a strand of traditional lights.
Yeah. Oh, because they're LEDs, right?
Exactly. They're also wicked bright and have way more colors because they're just RGB. I can program them. I can program each light individually to be whatever color I want it to be.
My LED menorah, I can do any color I want and any light with any kind of pattern. It could change while it's on.
Yep.
Right. It could cycle and rotate and do all kinds of stuff. So those are actually really good. I think that must be what the people who are doing those like fancy displays outside are using. The ones that like,
yeah. The tricky part is you often can't get those in very long strands, and they very rarely can daisy chain like traditional lights.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of the fancy ones outside are still traditional, regular old light bulbs like incandescents because it's just at that scale, that's easier. The consequence is they use way more power.
Well, yeah, I mean, you see like people make like, LED video walls, right? Where it's basically a screen made out of a zillion LEDs in a grid, but it's so big and you're so far away that it looks really great.
Yep.
So you can set up something like that and just imagine that same sort of Videotron setup, right? Except instead of, being in a rectangle, you just split up the LEDs all over the place. Tree, in front of a house, right? Down the street, down the side of the driveway, up a can, in Santa's ass, wherever you got to put them,
So yeah, that's literally all that's going in my life, and I don't have work this week, so I'm like wearing pajamas right now. And
work this week or next week?
I got to work next week. I got a lot to do next week, actually.
Just waking up, doing whatever I feel like doing. I feel like after the show, I'm gonna have someone deliver some food for me to eat, and then maybe I'll bike to nowhere.
I biked this morning.
I feel like doing.
Played some video games. Talk about some of the video games I'm playing maybe next week.
I'm playing some games also.
I guess we'll get into it. So just like on Monday, we're doing the show on like the decade of anime and animation and everything. But there is some news. There's actually some extremely important news. I'll link to this Verge article that goes into it in detail. Sony, who, if you don't recall, owns Funimation, has bought Crunchyroll for $1.2 billion from, if you didn't know who owned Crunchyroll, AT&T.
Yeah. So, we've talked before about antitrust and stuff and how unifying and merging and stuff is not great for, assuming you're already on board with capitalism or whatever, right?
Yep.
It's not good for a host of reasons that we don't.
But it's struggle. It always there's this competing, like this duality of interest in that on one hand, we need to break up monopolies to make sure there's competition and a free market and to make sure that no company gets too powerful and starts to have undue influence. But on the other hand, as a consumer, I only want to go to one webpage to do a particular kind of thing.
Yep, that's a constant struggle.
I only want to go to Steam to buy games. I never even used the stupid Epic Store because I didn't want to have two things on my desk.
There's some things in the world that benefit from unification of there being only one thing, and there are some things that benefit from having choices.
In this case, society loses, but user experience wins.
And it's hard to get the best of both worlds unless capitalism will never give you the best of both worlds. The only way to get the best of both worlds is to force it, either by saying, here's an open standard that everyone must follow, period. So like for instant messaging, right? You could be like, everyone must use this XMPP, even though XMPP is not great, just using it as an example. And then choose whatever thing you want. So in web browsers, right? It's like, okay, choose whatever web browser you want. Here's how HTTP works. Right?
Yep.
But then the other
Instant
thing,
messaging used to be that way, but it's all proprietary again.
yep. The other thing you can do is you can say, okay, there's only one thing, but it has to follow all these rules, right? There's one telephone system; it must work this way. You have to provide service to everyone, right? Here's how the numbers work. No deviating, right? Et cetera, et cetera. So that's how it goes. So, but his thing with the anime situation, it's like, okay, you don't want to have to get 10 subscriptions to be able to legally watch all the anime.
But the weird thing is, I like Crunchyroll because it has a lot of the stuff that people don't talk about that I want to watch.
Yeah, it's been like, how many times have we done a Geek Nights episode on some tiny show that's got like short episodes or some really weird thing?
Yep, like Yamishibai,
yeah, or
Kiklos.
Clothes, any of these kind of things. It's like the Netflix ain't doing those, right? Funimation ain't doing those, as to my knowledge, right? Crunchyroll was like specializing in, Bananya, right? It's like without Crunchyroll, you would not have no Bananya, right?
Yeah.
In the US. It's so tiny.
But at the same time, every time I wanted to watch a bigger anime, it was either on Netflix, which I paid for, or Funimation, which I didn't pay for.
Right, is those other services are just into those big shows that you can get a lot of people to watch. Crunchyroll, as a service, would go sort of that extra mile to get this long tail of the smaller anime, the animes that otakus knew about, some of them quite popular, right? And get them subtitled fast, right? Sometimes same day as the simulcast or whatever, if you cared about that, which I never did, right? At a reasonable price, and you can just watch freaking everything. And it's pretty good. I remember Crunchyroll started as just piracy.
Yeah.
People forget that. Crunchyroll just started as a website that was blatantly pirating everything.
It was actually talking about the decade. It wasn't too far before the start of this decade was when Crunchyroll made that shift to be legit.
Yep, exactly. And then they sold, right? And look at all the manga pirating websites. They weren't able to make that Crunchyroll transition to legitimacy, or did they even try?
I don't think they tried. I also, sadly, despite one of the newses we're going to talk about, don't think there's enough money in that in the American market.
I don't know if there is either or not, but that's... Yeah. But anyway, so Crunchyroll is bought. It is not yet unified, but presumably this might be, we'll see, it's going to be a mix of good and bad for the anime fan in the United States.
On one hand, Sony now has near absolute power over the American anime industry.
It's just, in terms of legal anime watching in the US, you're going to be having your Netflix and your Sony. Those are your two choices.
And I think what I suspect we'll see is Sony will start to go after shows that are made by regular studios, and Netflix will double down on funding their own anime to be made via studios that they partner with.
That's been happening, yeah. We might see, I think you're going to see unification of Funimation and Crunchyroll, so you're not going to have to be like, damn, the show's not on the service I want. You're going to subscribe to the one service and get all the shows.
Yeah.
Right? And that's going to be, I guess, a positive. Who knows what the price will be, though, right? With their monopoly power, they might be able to jack up the price on us.
I think I was watching some anime that's Funimation that was also on Hulu because we had a free trial of Hulu, but I think now there's no reason to watch Hulu at all for anything.
I don't know. Well, they're not unified yet. Crunchyroll and Funimation are still separate.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're also going to be seeing, I guess, bad news. One company deciding, right, which things to bring over, and translate and stream, pretty much. So
with the caveat that so far in the ecosystem, pretty much everything gets brought over.
Right, but will they start making different choices? Because there's no one else. It's not like they don't have to say, oh no, if we don't bring this over, someone else will and steal our customers. They'd be like, our customers have to go with us. We have all the anime no one else has. We can just bring over just enough anime to keep them subscribed, and we don't need to bring over your, or do a bunch of hard work to try to.
Now, here's where the ecosystem gets interesting.
And try to spread it, right? They can just be like, yeah, we'll get your Borutos and we're good, right?
If we look at just animation as a global industry instead of focusing just on anime, it gets a little more interesting because part of the reason AT&T was willing to sell Crunchyroll was that they're going the Netflix route and partnering with HBO Max.
Mm-hmm.
Which, as you know, is getting a lot of the prestige animation, likely Venture Brothers, the Adventure Time stuff. Like, HBO Max has got a lot going on, as we've talked about in previous Geek Nights. I think the players in this space now are going to be Sony, HBO, and Netflix. And those will be the three. That's where animation is.
Apple's trying a little bit, right?
Apple's barely. I mean, Apple's got the Wolfwalkers exclusive, and look, even Apple
Yeah.
people were complaining about the exclusive on Apple TV.
Yeah, well, I mean, now that see, the thing is, Apple's big thing historically, animation-wise, movie-wise, has been their ties with Disney, Pixar.
But
But
Disney
now
has
that
their own thing.
Now that Disney has their own thing, Apple has lost that, and I think that pretty much really hurts Apple Video's prospects. Right?
I wouldn't be super shocked if Apple over time gets out of this business and just basically tries to take a VIG from the.
Give up easily.
Yeah, but business-wise, the better way to go would be to provide first-class experiences for all these other services on. Or
They do. All those services have first class, like
Yep.
A plus Apple TV apps, and they when they're on, you go to watch an Apple keynote, they're like, "We got Disney Plus app. How great is that?" You know.
yeah, but Apple. I don't know how widespread Apple TV's usage actually is.
Well, a bunch of people are getting free trials when they get iPhones. I didn't activate mine yet.
Yeah, but I'd love to see the stats on how many people get a free trial and don't bother.
Yeah, speaking of, I was told by Tom Moore on Twitter, the director of Wolfwalkers, that you would be able to buy Wolfwalkers on iTunes, like buying a movie. But apparently I looked on iTunes and it's not there. I think it really is Apple TV Plus exclusive. You have to have a free or non-free subscription to Apple TV Plus to watch it legally in the US.
Yeah, that's a shame.
So yeah, I think another, one last thing though is in terms of going over to Japan to try to license anime, right? When I think you actually see one of the more positive sides of monopoly power is when it's wielded against the consumer, it's bad. But when it's wielded against another company, it can sometimes be good or bad, right?
It can often be good for the consumer, but it's almost never good for the workers in those companies.
Right, depending on whose side you're on, right? So like when Amazon, right? Well, I remember here's a better example, Walmart. I remember this dude, he was a lawnmower company. He made lawnmowers. And he made really good lawnmowers, like high quality ones, right? And Walmart wanted to buy his lawnmowers and put them on the shelf. And they said, hey, we don't want to buy the lawnmowers you have. Those are too expensive and fancy for Walmart customers. We want you to make a shitty, low quality lawnmower that's cheaper, that has your brand on it, right? It's a special model just for Walmart. And it's like, if he says yes, he becomes mega rich because suddenly Walmart signs a check to buy all those lawnmowers from him, right? And if he says no, it's like, he has his principles and he can go home, right? But that's a lot of power Walmart has as being such a big company, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in the same way that, that power can be used for good. That's why single payer healthcare is a great idea, because you can go to all the pharmaceutical companies and saying, this is what we're going to pay for that drug. Deal with it.
Now, a better way to go would be to nationalize those pharmaceutical companies, but
obviously, but in this case, you'll have Funimation, Crunchyroll, Sony going to Japan, or I guess they are Japan. They're Sony. They're in Japan, but going to the anime studios of Japan and saying, "You want your anime to be on computers streaming in the U.S. legally, huh? This is what we're going to pay." The end, right? As opposed to negotiating, right? They'll just set the price because it's them or
yep,
the highway, right? Nothing.
The thing is, what's interesting is this means that the way I like the streaming service I already use, assuming Crunchyroll and Funimation like merge their stuff completely, I'll basically have an account on all three places that I would ever want to watch animation. So I'll be covered as a consumer.
Yep. We'll see. So this isn't necessarily a news. This is
It's a tweet.
Yeah, it's a tweet. It's something that's always true, or it's been true for quite a while. We could almost put this into the main bit area.
We've talked about this many times.
Right. But there's, I actually when I was trying to find the tweet that somebody retweeted this week, I actually found many tweets about this because like people trying to drive this point home because it's not in the consciousness of people who think about comic books and graphic novels in the US, even though it's so true, right? And it's like, when you think about comic books, graphic novels in the US, you think about, what's the general consciousness is like Marvel and DC, the big two, right? With their superheroes stuff, right? As being the top, right? Even if you look at Eisner Awards, which do have plenty of non-superhero things, there's plenty of superhero things in the Eisner Awards, even now, right?
Yep.
It's like San Diego Comic-Con, you go there, superheroes all over the place, right? And it's like, that's the thing people think of. And then under that, you think of like, you got your mangas and you got your indie books, your Image, your IDW, your whoever's, right? Your Dark Horses. And then under that, you got just other graphic novels, artsy people, mocha type stuff, right? But the fact is, if you actually look at numbers, right? This tweet says the big two are at Marvel and DC. They're Dave Pilkey and Raina Tegelmeier, right? So Scholastic is the biggest comic book company in the
Yep,
United
but
States.
nerds won't talk about that. They won't talk about manga. They're definitely not going to talk about that.
Do you know how much, like Captain Underpants, do you know how much that sells? The amount it sells is so ludicrous, right? It's like there are more kids reading that shit than have ever read like any Spider-Man ever.
Well,
right?
the quote, the next tweet in that thing is so on point. Jeff Kinney has sold 200 million books since 2007. That's more than all Avengers comics have sold since their launch in 1963.
Yeah. Anyway, and he says, anyway, some nerd told me I don't know much about mainstream comics, right? Is that even when they were like big, right? Say like, like Golden Age comics when Superman was a big deal, right? It's like, superhero comic books, even when they were great and huge and everyone was buying them, have never been as big.
They were dwarfed by like a Scholastic book, by some random manga, dwarfed by Disney Ducks.
Right? You want to talk about sales, right? Let's talk about One Piece, right? Eiichiro Oda has sold more One Piece worldwide. Is that, I don't know, is it the best-selling book, period, in the history of
Maybe other than the Christian Bible?
it's like, I guess it's not Bible level, right? But it's like, if you take all the One Piece volumes combined, you are getting pretty high on that list of like best-selling.
As of September 2019, so a little over a year ago, One Piece has sold 454 million copies globally, according to the statistic I found online.
Right. So Jeff Kinney has sold 200 million books since 2007. Eiichiro Oda has sold two Jeff Kinneys. So Jeff Kinney's already bigger than every Avengers comic ever, all the issues, right? And Eiichiro Oda is like two Jeff Kinneys.
Kinney is a little bit above Blackjack, but a little bit below Detective Conan.
Right. It's like, right. So when you got, I think, the comics media is such an there's not a lot of money in talking about comics. Even these, small, low budget journalistic outfits that have tried to talk about, get into comics journalism, they either have to go full superhero and talk about superhero movies and all that other stuff, right? The same way a comic book store has to sell a whole bunch of other stuff, right? The comic book news has to talk about a bunch of other stuff. Or like the tiny indie ones, something like Comics Journal. It's like those things actually, they said, yeah, we're going to be a low budget, high brow kind of thing. And, they try to keep it going and they were, not a lot of them are able to keep it going. All the comics journalism these days is fan journalism, which has the wrong perspective.
Well,
right?
it's fans who are
superhero comic books making a podcast and not kids talking about Captain Underpants.
Well, it's more interesting that I think, because it's fans who often have a grudge against all the things that are more popular than their thing and try to rationalize how their thing is actually bigger. I think some of it is not unconscious bias, but conscious active bias.
Maybe, or, it's just,
I think another part of it is the American comic, like superhero comic industry does a good job of controlling what limited amount of their media gets talked about in mainstream news. And controlling that narrative fairly effectively.
Right? So the intellectual property of Spider-Man is enormous.
Yeah.
Right? Much more than Captain Underpants hasn't had a movie. Although I don't know why he hasn't, because how much money would that thing fucking make? Jesus Christ. You'd have like everyone under the age of 10 in the whole country going to that. But it's like just the how big a thing is compared to how big it is perceived to be.
Scott, there was a Captain Underpants movie in 2017.
Shows what I fucking know. Was it in theaters?
Yeah, budget 38 million, box office 125 million.
Yeah, that's lower than I expected. Why? It still made a bunch of money. I'll take 100-something million, right? Why not? But it's like the perception of how big things are, right, is based on the media, journalism, how much people talk about it, how much people tweet about it, right?
There's also a Netflix show.
Okay. How big things actually are is unrelated to that, right? There are things that are relatively not that popular that get talked about a lot, right? The people who run the big media companies, the people who run television, talk about things that are on television because that's where they make their money, right? So that, if you're CBS and you have golf on, the news is going to talk about golf, right? But guess what? If League of Legends is bigger than golf, you're not going to feel like it's bigger than golf.
Yep. Like, what was that thing? More people watch the Overwatch championships than watched the Super Bowl, but no one's talking about that.
Right, exactly. So there's this mismatch, and you have to be constantly aware of it because even if you block all ads everywhere, always, right? That consciousness of just the general, media, right, will cause a mismatch in your brain of how big is a thing really, or is that actually a not as big thing that's just talked about a lot?
You know where we see this a lot right now, and I think there's a lot of toxic consequences happen as a result, is the cosplay at conventions and the cosplay and nerdery. Nerd inside baseball coverage of fan conventions of all kinds focuses almost entirely on the cosplay.
That's true.
Which you can understand why, like, some reporter who doesn't know sent, like, go cover this convention, sees a bunch of people in crazy costumes, gets a whole bunch of B-roll of that, and they're good. They pack up and leave. They're not going to, like, the basement panel room to sit through something for an hour.
Well, but also cosplay is kind of big, right?
It is. It's big to a point, but it's not like the focus of these cons that a lot of people think it is. A lot of people have a perception that it is the primary focus of almost all these cons, and you see that.
For a lot of people.
It is for a lot of people.
If you made a pie chart of like primary thing you are here at this con for, cosplay would be the biggest wedge, but it would not be a wedge that is greater than 50%.
Yeah, but what I think I've seen happen is that is at Comic Cons that sort of becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, which fine. But then there's other cons that don't support cosplay, and cosplay people tend to have an outsized impression of how big their like industry and like the space around them is, and then they seem to get mad and cause drama when they're at conventions that don't support them the way they expect to be supported. There's a whole thing going on there.
Yep. Anyway.
All right, we can jump into the main bit via things of the day. But anyway, things of the day. What do you got?
What do I have? So, the old toy, right? The chattering teeth. You wind it up, and it's just a set of teeth, and they start chattering like tick, tick, tick.
I think I saw that for the first time in Pee-wee's Great Big Adventure.
Yeah, it's used, a lot. It's like,
and in old cartoons.
I never had one, but it was like a common slapstick comedy device, right? You would see it's the kind of thing you would see next to a Mad magazine.
Yep.
Right? Or,
like right in the same collection of like a whoopee cushion and.
Whoopee cushion. Oh yeah, right. So that was invented by a person specifically, obviously, right? A person named, what's this dude's name? It's not in the title of the YouTube.
Eddie Goldfarb.
Eddie Goldfarb, probably an old Jewish guy. Anyway. I did not know until today. Today I learned Eddie Goldfarb lives.
Eddie Goldfarb invented Kerplunk?
Eddie Goldfarb is 98. Not only did he invent the chattering teeth and Kerplunk, he invented like the gun that shoots bubbles. He invented Shark Attack, the board game. Like the amount of stuff that Eddie Goldfarb has invented toy-wise is like, why is this person, like, I don't think it's an exaggeration to say, like, is probably on like the great artist level, like Picasso, Van Gogh level of contributions to art, if you consider toy art, which I think is obvious.
I mean, think those kinds of toys like blended into the background of like Americana and the fabric of comedy.
Right. So it's like, this amazing person has been unknown until today. There's a video about this person. He's living in a retirement place in somewhere.
Looks like a nice one.
Yeah, he's got like a whole house. He can walk. He's 98.
If I'm doing as well as he is when I'm 98, I'll consider that a win.
In the video, they show it's like a little mini documentary about him. It shows like what his life is like, hanging out with the old people, being active. He's still got a workshop. He's still making toys in there, right? He's got a little lathe. He's got all kinds of action going on. He knows, and not only that, this is a cool old man, right? Despite being 98, right? Despite being a veteran of World War II who was doing radar on a Navy submarine, right? pretty sure World War One didn't have the submarine.
World War One did have the submarine.
He's not a World War One veteran because
Yes, but World War One had the submarine. Just
didn't have this kind of submarine.
You would be surprised how advanced the submarines of World War One were.
I guess I would be. The point is, despite being 98, in the video they show this dude. He's Googling for other toys to see if someone's patented it already. He's, talking to Siri, right, to get the weather, right? He's using a 3D printer to make shit in his workshop. It's like, this is a dude who kept up with the time, right?
That's one of the most important things you can do in your life is just keep up with the times.
Right. This is not someone who's like, I'm cranky and doing it the old-fashioned way. I think about another video I saw recently of the guy who's still making phyllo dough the old-fashioned way, and it's like a tourist attraction almost, because it's not economical to make phyllo dough the old-fashioned way. It's really slow and laborious.
Yeah.
But it's like that kind of life that the very old, craftsman leads, right? And it's like, that's kind of what I want to be when I'm an old man. I want to be the old craftsman type old man, right?
I hope I'm still recording something like GeekNights when I'm 90.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. But I think, I saw the old Philo Man and I was thinking that's who I want to be, old Philo Man. But now that I see old chattering teeth toy man, I'm like, you know what? While old Philo Man is amazing, right? There's actually, I think there's something to be said here for old, toy man being, I guess, better in that he's managed to maintain the essence and importance of the craftsmanship.
But not tying himself to traditions and tools.
Right, without being stubborn about the tool, right? It's like, it's like you can still take great, be some great photographer using a brand new digital camera and some Photoshop. You don't just got to use film in the dark room forever.
Yep.
Right. But you can, I think what's important is that with whichever method or tools you're using, that you're the old person who's still, making stuff, right? Whether it's phyllo dough or photos or toys, right? And keeping it going, right? So yeah, great little 20-minute documentary here. Highly recommend.
All right, so I got a simple thing. It's a technology conventions video or connections video, but I haven't linked to this guy in a while. But he cuts a hole in the side of a dishwasher because he's replacing it. So he does some video of like what goes on into dishwasher and explains the way he
like a piece of plastic over the side with a camera next to it. So
basically, yeah. But he explains something that you and I are often mad about in a very good way for everyone who doesn't realize this. He basically talks about why all the people who wash their dishes before they put their dishes in the dishwasher just like fundamentally misunderstand how dishwashers work.
Oh, modern dishwashers, yes.
Old dishwashers were fine too. You've never had to rinse off your dishes before you put them in a dishwasher. Like
I never have. But
yeah.
I was under the impression that the reason that people did was because old dishwashers were shitty, and so they needed.
Nope, old dishwashers were even better at this than modern dishwashers. They just were more wasteful.
Okay. Oh, okay. Because I was under the impression that people were rinsing dishes because old dishwashers didn't get them all the way clean and new ones did. But I guess that's wrong?
That's mostly wrong.
Maybe it's not old dishwashers, but people had shitty dishwashers.
Yep. Or, more importantly, the current problem people are having is that they're using those pods instead of regular old dishwasher formula, which is fine. It's like the same stuff.
I use one. It's not a pod. It's not like a plastic bag one. It's like a cube, almost like a little rectangle of solid powder that's just been packed.
Yeah, I got something like that too.
It works pretty great. I don't have a problem with it.
But basically, if you use those, but you don't put any detergent in the pre-wash thing, that is usually the reason why dishwashers don't actually wash unless people pre-wash and pre-rinse.
The what's it called? The blue stuff.
Not even the blue stuff. You could just put two of those pods in. Put one pod in the main thing and put one pod in the pod. Just huck it in. The way dishwashers worked before the pods is you put a bunch of detergent in the cup that opens midway through, and you put some detergent in the cup that's already open. That's just right there in the first cycle.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah, so I don't think you know how dishwashers wash things either.
I don't know if my dishwasher has a
I am confident your dishwasher does support that.
Like
unless you have a Bosch, because some newer dishwashers have given up. They realized that people just use those pods, and they redesigned how they work.
Yeah, so like my dishwasher, there's one thing, it opens, and there's two compartments in there separated by like a little bridge.
Yeah.
That's just, I think, to help you measure the amount of detergent, right? Because both of those open together. It's just one little.
Yeah. The real key is
there's two doors. I have seen though some dishwashers that have two flaps that are separate for two different things.
Mine has
the one
two.
I have only has one flap. It opens and that's it.
But basically, the gist of it is, and also the drain impeller on most American dishwashers is actually. Remember how I said way when I was a kid, Grandma had a dishwasher that just had a full-on garbage disposal in it.
Okay.
Most modern dishwashers do have something like that in them. There's little blades in the impeller at the bottom that runs the drain.
I think mine might actually have that, even though we're told in New York that we don't have.
The ones in dishwashers are apparently legal in New York because they don't count as garbage disposals.
Yeah.
But if you have certain brands, they replace that with a stupid little filter instead. You got to clean like regularly, or your dishwasher stops working.
I was looking for the filter in the dishwasher and I didn't find one. So sometimes it does make a noise that could be, blade-esque. So.
Yep. But basically, he points out, even does he does this whole thing you can watch, but you don't even have to put. Maybe if there's a pound of rice on the plate, get rid of that. But even if there's chunks stuck to it, if you actually put dishwasher detergent in for the pre-wash, it'll wash that stuff off completely fine. And most people who complain about the dishwasher not working well just don't understand how to use their own dishwasher.
My dishwasher has been working very well. I've just been using the automatic mode on it, not choosing any special modes. I'm gonna go read the manual for it and just double check to make sure we're using it optimally.
The other thing I did not know
it's doing a great job though. So
is that the pre-wash on most dishwashers it assumes that the hot water, because it's plugged into your hot water tap, that the hot water will come in hot. And if your apartment or house is the kind of place where it takes a while to get hot water, your dishwasher actually will work way shittier. It won't heat that water for the pre-wash cycle because it assumes unless it's a really fancy dishwasher, or it'll assume that the water coming in is already hot. So if you run your tap until hot water comes out first, your dishwasher that's not working so well will magically probably work a lot better. It's just a really good video that's at the level of. I
guess that would only happen if you woke up and turned the dishwasher on, right?
Yeah, pretty much. I get hot water pretty much instantly, unless I wake up and take a shower before 6 a.m.
Yeah, right. So then you're having that.
Yeah.
Anyway,
let's get ready to it. Meta moment. We ain't doing anything. We're stuck at home, making some content maybe.
Yeah, I'm continuing to be home for the rest of the year. I'm going back to work January 4th, so I'm continuing to work on playing video games mostly.
Yep. I'm off work this week. I see you're playing Hades. I got to play that so we can talk about it.
Yeah, play that. We'll talk about it. It's a good game. It's very, it's an action RPG that's very Slay the Spire-esque.
I think tonight I'm going to finally play, either tonight or this week, later in the week, I'm playing Phasmophobia because everyone's saying real good things about it. It's that co-op, ghost fighting game.
Okay.
It's one of those games that is good in that it supports VR players and desktop players pretty well. And in fact, some of the roles are better for desktop or better for VR. That's a hybrid model that I think will be very good for game designers to internalize over the next 5 or 6 years, as not everyone has VR headsets. Making a game like Star Wars Squadrons, a game that works well with VR but doesn't require VR, is a sweet spot of design right now.
I definitely think in general, games that require different, you have different roles for different players that require different skills.
I want to see radically different interfaces.
Right, that require different interfaces, different skills, different equipment, different things are very good because they are very inclusive, right? It's you want to play something with your friend and you're really good at head clicking, so you want to play Counter-Strike, and your friend is not good at head clicking, right?
Natural selection. They could be the commander instead.
Exactly. So just games where different roles are actually very, very different, and to the point where the people are almost playing different games.
I'm a big fan of radical asymmetry in games lately anyway, both tabletop and video.
Oh yeah, give me that Captain Sonar action. Right?
Oh yeah.
So submarines again. Captain Sonar World War I.
You really didn't know there were submarines in World War I? That was the entire. That was they were actually really good. That was kind of the entire German war strategy after the Schleifenplan failed.
I'm pretty sure Das Boot is World War II, right? Right?
I'm just not going to touch that one. Let's get into the main bit.
You don't know, do you? Now I don't know.
Scott, U-boats were used in World War One.
I'm looking it up now. Anyway,
we're talking about the last decade of animation.
World War II. I was right.
You're right on that one.
Okay. I was right about
There were U-boats in both, but the U-boats that were used in World War One were not that far off from modern diesel submarines in a lot of surprising ways.
Well, the one they had in Das Boot, which was World War II, was real shitty, so I can't imagine how well if the one was World War II.
They were not pleasant to be in, and they were dangerous.
All right, let's move on.
So, we figured, end of the year, every year we're going to do shows like this because it's really easy to come up with this idea. But
or not. Wait 10 more years before we do shows like this.
Well, we can do the year, like last year, next year thing.
No, let's do 2020s and 2030s the next time we can do this show. Sorry.
Okay. Then I'll ask you to come up with. Well, I guess next year we'll probably just take time off this time of year because there won't be a global pandemic murdering everyone. That's the only reason we're doing all these extra shows right now. It's so weird to do a show when I didn't go to work.
Yeah, we can only hope. Anyway.
Usually if one of us doesn't go to work, we just don't bother doing Geek Nights.
So what happened this decade, 2010 to 2020, in animation, comics, whatever? So what I've seen is that at least as far as animation goes, right? It's sort of like this, how did it go for me personally versus how did it go for the industry kind of difference, right? And so I think what happened is that if you look at when I looked back at my data on my computer here, right, and what was happening around 2009, 2010, right, is this sort of shift happened where a lot of things ended, started, right, sort of booted up, and all those shifts that happened then, the rest of the decade, everything that happened was sort of the end result of that just either continuing or increasing or accelerating.
Yep.
There wasn't I didn't see a lot of major shifts afterwards between, say, 2010, 2011, and 2020.
Like, one thing that really stands out, Adventure Time, which we've talked about a lot recently on Geek Nights because it's still going, technically. Yep. Adventure Time started in 2010.
There you go.
The pilot was in 2007, but the actual show, Adventure Time, premiered for real in April of 2010 and sort of set the tone for the decade of animation, especially in America. How many shows only exist because Adventure Time broke that ground for them to make a show like that?
Yep. Cartoon Network shifted its gears from what it had before then, your Dexter's Labs, your Powerpuff Girls, right? And all that stuff, right? Adventure Time was all right, this is now how Cartoon Network do, right? And then you got your Steven Universes and all your other, right?
And there's a serial show that builds on itself, that grows, that deals with complex, real, even adult themes, but yet is still accessible to kids. Adventure Time broke a lot of ground in terms of representation. It's even scary to think back on that was even controversial in popular culture so recently, within this decade, but it was. The networks wouldn't even let Marceline and Bubblegum kiss, and here we are in 2020 where there was a whole special dedicated to And Then They Kiss, and Steven Universe ran in entirety.
I was always surprised that Powerpuff Girls let them have him, even though him was not on very many episodes. That was my favorite Powerpuff Girls character by a lot.
Him was definitely the best Powerpuff Girls character, bar none. No. I even made a mashup of My Little Pony and Powerpuff Girls with him at one point.
So that's another thing, right? My Little Pony Friendship is Magic. Another serial, right?
Yeah.
When did that show fucking start? Right? And it ended. It's pretty much this decade is the My Little Pony decade.
Yep.
Right? That started then and it went through and it ended all within 2010 to 2020. It wasn't something that started in the late 2000s.
Yep. So Adventure Time and My Little Pony Friendship is Magic. That's some power.
Yep. That's pretty much the defining American animations, right? So anime wise, right? You look and, the 2000s, we had this big anime boom in the US, right? And all that kind of action, that happened, right? When
Crunchyroll went actually went legit before the decade and sort of exploded onto the scene. That was this decade. If we had to say anything about anime, it was that anime truly got mainstream in the US. Like a lot of people watch anime who don't even think about it being anime. They just watch it.
I think that was true before also, but now it's just, more true, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, well, the ecosystem stabilized in a big way, and we're seeing, like, just now at the end of the decade, there's a radical shift in the industry yet again.
But I think what I'm trying to say is that there were like a set of studios, both Japan, I guess companies, right? Media companies in that industry, both Japan side and US side, right? And some of them still exist from, way back, right? But it's sort of the organization of those companies sort of shifted around that time. And then, there hasn't been too big of a shift since then, right? So like, for example, sad times, right? Satoshi Kon passed away in 2010.
Yeah.
Right? So that sort of put a close on that biz. But then we saw Masaki Yuasa rose over the course of this decade. Right?
Yuasa just batting 1,000 and producing way more anime than any human has a right to.
Right, pretty much, 2010s was the decade of Yuasa. It was also the decade of like Studio Trigger coming out of, nowhere, right?
Anime was saved again and again and again and again.
Yep. It was the decade of Hosoda. Hosoda existed, but Summer Wars came out in 2010, right?
Yep.
And so Hosoda put out, a movie every, I don't know what's his schedule, 2-3 years. He's got another one coming soon. That we should have been news. They just announced what it was.
Yep. Meanwhile, I realized something that I actually want to mention briefly around the whole seeding ground, like the ground that made space before. The show that actually did this first was Venture Brothers. But that shit started in 2004, and they produced it so slowly.
Yeah, but Adventure Brothers, I don't think it was for children.
No, but it did like a lot of the things that Adventure Time did, and shows like it did. Venture Brothers kind of did those sorts of like storytelling tropes and storytelling techniques of a serial first in this era, but it was kind of obscure, aimed at a different audience, and was put out so slowly that no one realized what they were doing until well into this decade.
All right, but also you look at, say, Studio Ghibli, right? It's like before 2010s, right? They were solid. They were releasing their movies, right? They had that run, right?
Yep.
And then it was, Princess Mononoke, right? Was, I guess, around 2000-ish, right? Princess Mononoke, I think, was... Because I remember it being in a theater in Israel in the year 2000. And then, they had their, Spirited Away was also in the 2000s, right?
Yep.
The biggest one they've had, right? And then...
Cat Returns, Howls, Earthsea.
Right. And then sort of when they got into the 2010s, that's sort of when it's like Miyazaki retires. He unretires. Goro puts out a movie, something else, right? And they sort of like, destabilized a bit. That regularity, that just powerful march of Ghibli movies sort of,
There was definitely a sense of a decline of Ghibli as a driving force and a rise of all these other studios and creators.
Yeah, even the Brooms one, that was like a spin-off of Ghibli that former Ghibli people, they didn't make a good movie.
Nope. And we haven't even talked about Earwig and the Witch, which I am 100% down with 3D CG anime. Like, do not get me wrong here. That Lupin movie, which we're going to watch soon, looks great.
We're going to watch it real soon.
Yeah.
This week.
Definitely watching it this week. But Earwig and the Witch kind of looks like last decade Pixar animation. Like, it does not look good.
Who knows? So yeah, and then, that sort of pattern, right, that has been established, right, of, that after that shift has just sort of maintained, right? Those studios making those anime movies, they just kept putting movies out on a schedule.
Yep.
Right? Oh, what's his name? Of course. How could I forget? Cloud Guy. It's the Cloud Guy. What's his name? The voice of a distant star guy. You don't remember his name either?
Makoto Shinkai.
Makoto Shinkai. This has been also the decade of Makoto Shinkai, obviously, right? On that same schedule, right? Of, putting out movies. But I think it wasn't actually until, when exactly did Your Name come out? Because that was like the first big successful one, right?
I was on a flight and I watched it because it happened to be on a Delta flight.
Your Name is actually from 2016. So like Shinkai, we knew about, like even when we were in college, we knew who Shinkai was.
I still think his second best movie is Place Promised.
Yeah, probably. But they got the 5 centimeters per second, whatever.
Yep.
But even though we knew who Shinkai was in the early 2000s, mid 2000s, didn't really bust out until this decade and become a big deal, right? On that same level as your Yuasas and your everyone else, right? So.
But yeah, I think that a broader point around this decade is that it really feels like we are living in this golden age of animation right now, like a mega renaissance of just animated shows across a variety of topics from a variety of studios, a variety of styles. Like there is more good animation to watch now than there might have ever been.
Well, I think you have people who grew up really watching a lot of animation, caring a lot about animation, right? Like, because think about when we were, kids, what was available on TV for us at that time, people who came, before us had like Hanna-Barbera garbage,
Yeah.
garbage, right? But, they didn't necessarily, Looney Tunes were in the theaters, right? They weren't on TV necessarily.
But I was a kid who like rejected American animation like at a very young age and got hyper obsessed with anime for a long time.
So we had Looney Tunes, so we were able to see, we had Disney movies, right? We had, weird Little Mermaids, Lion Kings, all those, right? And we had, we up to those Dexter's Labs, and we also had like BTAS and all that, right? That was like when we grew up. People who grew up after us, they were starting to just get like Pokemon is on TV, right? It's like they were just direct to the anime, not anime as this rare, special, different thing. But also the Looney Tunes weren't there anymore necessarily, right? The BTAS wasn't there and such. And now if you're a kid, are you even watching cartoons on TV? You're just watching YouTube, right? So the people that are our age are adults who are working, and they're working around the world, and they have powerful computers with which it's now easier to make animation, better animation. Not that it's easy ever, but it's, they can make it. So that's why we're seeing what we're seeing right now is people our age who grew up seeing the things that we saw are now in charge of.
Like case in point, an example that stands out very strongly for me is that Netflix Castlevania, because that is clearly like, that is a labor of love of the kinds of people who, when they were young, saw Vampire Hunter D and said, all I want is something that's like that. More like that, please. And here we are.
So I think that is another thing that happened sort of later in the decade is the
second half of the decade was an acceleration.
It's Netflix specifically, I think, but this sort of
because look, Netflix has got right now Castlevania, Hilda, Kipo was on Netflix, which was fantastic. There's Disney show, I think, but
Dragon Prince.
Yeah, Dragon Prince, which got picked up for what, 4 or 5 more seasons? Like they're gonna do it to the end.
A lot of seasons for Dragon Prince.
Yeah, Disney, like the reboot of DuckTales. There were multiple.
Disney's thing, I think, Gravity Falls. I think was the start of the Disney.
Gravity Falls was their toe dip into this like new era of TV. Gravity Falls was a fantastic show.
Oh yeah. What was the other thing? Oh, of course. So I think pretty sure didn't Secret of Kells come out in 2009 or 2010?
Oh, I was going to talk about that last. So into the Tom Moore trilogy began I think late 2009, early 2010 was Secret of Kells. Because remember, they had budget trouble. Like we're lucky they were even able to make Kells for a lot of reasons.
They only were able to make Wolfwalkers because Apple gave them money.
Yeah.
They get money wherever they can get money.
So look, over the course of the decade, they made those 3 like movies for all time. That trilogy, I think, will be looked at forever as an important milestone in just theatrical animation. Those movies are like, so good and so beautiful.
80s animation, right? You're thinking Thundercats, He-Man, Transformers, Voltron, original My Little Pony, Care Bears, Gummy Bears, right? You think about 90s, you're starting to think about, those, the Dexter's Labs and the, those sorts of things, right? The Ren and Stimpy's, the Dougs, right? That's the 90s thought, right? In the 2000s, I guess it's like what, the SpongeBob's, right, of the world. But I can only, in my life, I can only think about in the 2000s catching up on all of the anime, the great anime of the past that had suddenly become accessible, right?
Which is partly, that's more of our like personal experience in that.
Even though those things were older, right? And also when I look at, the US animation of the 2000s, right? It feels like 2000 to 2010, it feels like at that time, that run of Disney movies, the Aladdin Lion King run had sort of
petered out.
right? Yeah. Pixar, I guess, started late high school, so late 90s. So I guess there was a lot of Pixar action in the 2000s, definitely. Your Cars and your.
Well, I'm just thinking off the top of my head of like animated movies I saw in the last decade that stood out. Like Tangled was good. Arrietty was okay. We talked about them a little bit.
2008.
How to Train Your Dragon, A Cat in Paris.
So 2000s was like the Pixar run, right? Not that run has ended, but I think it's they sort of had the sole control of that, right? Like DreamWorks was there, but it wasn't with their Shreks, I guess, also, right? But Pixar was really like the premier American animated movies of the 2000 to 2010, right? And now 210 to 220, we have not just like this, few things to focus on. It's like all those things we said.
There's such a variety. That's what stands out the most.
Decade,
Like, we get a show like BoJack Horseman, which I know that is not, like, you're not interested in a show that is adjacent to Californication, but that show was important and very good. Tuca and Birdie, that show...
Got canceled, right?
Well, it got re-picked up. Stay tuned. But Tuca and Birdie, I don't think anyone's made a show like that had a mass audience before. Like, I think how much animation I am just watching on a daily basis, like right now, like it just kept accelerating. The trend that started at the beginning of the decade just accelerated and accelerated and accelerated to the point that I have to like queue up which show I'll watch next, and they're all great.
And this doesn't include like independently animated things on YouTube, right?
Exactly. Like how many of the YouTube channels we link to, like Worth It Kids, Big Top Burger, like low-tiered, independent, like published on YouTube animation is having its own golden age right now.
Yeah. I mean, YouTube wasn't launched until 2005. So YouTube did exist in the previous decade, but it wasn't a thing until this decade.
Yeah.
So what YouTube has done for animation has largely been this decade, almost entirely, right? And not just YouTube, but and comics also. What Twitter has done for comics is Twitter came out in 2007, but it wasn't really a thing. We talked about in the technology episode, right?
Yeah.
What Twitter and all these other social media platforms have done for comics, right? We talked about in the first part of the show in the news, right? Your Captain Underpants and your Raina Tegelmeier, right, being like the biggest. You know what the third biggest comic is in the U.S.? It's that dude drawing the Nathan Pyle guy with his little alien comic. The stupid aliens that they won't say the noun. They'll just describe the thing.
Oh, no.
Like instead of saying comic, they'll say like space ice or something,
Let me put all the irregular things inside of regular objects.
Exactly. That guy, right? Who makes those comics. He's like the third biggest comic seller. And how did he get that way? Posting a comic on Twitter, right? That's 2010s. That's this decade.
Though in my personal interaction with comics and animation, what I find is that I've been watching a lot more animation this decade for a lot of reasons. I have been reading a lot fewer comics, though.
I think also fewer comics. I think your reaction to all the animation is, oh my God, let me watch all this great animation.
I'm just watching, like something new comes out that's so good, I just have to watch it.
Where for me, it's like, okay, there's way too many things. I don't have time for all that shit. Let's only watch the extremely good ones and sort of queue up other things when I got some time. Because if I tried to watch them all, that's all I would do. I would not have time for anything else.
Right now we're in the middle of trying to finish Hilda before another show comes out.
Right.
Because season 2 of Hilda just dropped.
So comics-wise, right? At least personally, comics-wise, because I guess. I don't know if it's good or not, but I've every month since like 2006, I've ordered comics online from this one website, right, where I get a big discount, and I have to pre-order them, and I can just see my full order history forever there. And basically, what I can see is that in the 2010s, the early 2010, I was still buying a lot of comics, right? And what was happening was, I spent myself, right, the 2000s. Buying up sort of like a library of all of the already known great American graphic novels, right? Like full runs of like Vertigo stuff, right? Like all this stuff I had never read, not just American, but also like, let me buy all the Akiras. Let me buy all the, whatever it is, right? All this stuff I had never read that already exists, right? I spent a lot to acquire and read all of it, right? This like my whole life, all this stuff going back to forever in the past, right? Because comics aren't that old as right. I mean, I guess if you just count illustrations, they're super old. But in terms of comic books, they started in the early 1900s, right? They didn't go back that far. And then towards the 2010s, what was happening is I was sort of getting all the stuff that was sort of like the industry catching up to reprinting old stuff. Like I see a lot of like orders for like Blackjack, like they were still trying to get all the Tezuka into English.
Yeah.
Right. And like there were like these hot new things, right, that were still coming out then, right? Whereas now, like what happened is basically a lot of those things ended or caught up, right? To the ends. So it's like Yotsuba, I was buying a Yotsuba every month, and then that was it. And now I get a Yotsuba whenever there's a Yotsuba, which is every year or few, right? They don't come out that often. So there aren't too many things I'm following actively that are coming out regularly and actively, or if I am following, they come out with a trade once in a while. Right?
Honestly, the only things I'm following actively regularly as they come out there are 2 comics that I'm reading. I guess 3. Nothing special. I'm just reading that like actively as it comes out. Order of the Stick and Ogloff.
Yeah, Ogloff I am, right? So it's like I definitely at some point in the 2010s messed up my personal webcomic like reading system.
Well, that's something I found it difficult to really engage with I have a really easy pipeline of I'm going to watch some cartoons and I like watch them on all my devices. Like it doesn't matter what device I use. Everything just works. But depending on the comic I want to read, there's multiple places to go. There's different apps. Some comics just don't lend themselves to digital formats. Like there's a lot of
the serial webcomics, the Order of the Stick types that I do really like. But I haven't read Order of the Stick in so long because I forgot where I left off.
Yeah.
It's been so many years.
I think it's getting near the end.
Oh, that's good. But yeah, it's like I'd have to, go get it somehow. I have the books. The paper books are probably the easiest way to read it now, right?
Yep.
So I feel like for those, it's like I'm just gonna wait to your paper book now. It's too much for me to go try to read it on the internet, right? And the comics I'm reading on the web are the one shot, funny joke comics because they're on Twitter. You tweet out your funny comic, right? And then I can see it. I can't do the thing I used to do every morning where I'd open up one tab for every webcomic and see if there was a new strip. That happened in
Got to see if that Mega Tokyo updated, even though it's Thursday, and they definitely didn't.
I haven't done that in a decade. I can't even remember all the comics that were in to go check on, right?
So another thing with us, because we've gone on for a while already, that in our personal engagement, because this hasn't been a radical change, though it is more accessible now. Anime movies are much more like this decade. They've been in the theaters in America in a way that they were not in the previous decade. You used to have to go somewhere weird.
Special event in the 2000s if an anime movie was going to be.
The 2010s, I'm looking at old GeekNights episodes. We went to a physical theater to watch almost every anime movie that came out that wasn't a sequel.
We also live in New York, but no, they're screening everywhere. Right?
Yeah.
It's like if it wasn't a pandemic, Wolfwalkers was ready to screen across the country.
Yeah.
Right? In all kinds of theaters. So it's like, yeah, they some of them have limited runs, like 1 or 2 nights here and there.
But we'll go, and we see the same people at those screenings. There's people in New York who I recognize just because we end up at the same theater to watch the same anime movie.
But yeah, the movie theater has really opened up to, not just Disney animation, but all, and DreamWorks and whoever, but everything, right? It's going to be there, even if it's just for a few nights or maybe more than a few nights. Who knows?
So if I had to guess, I think what's going to happen over the next decade is animation is going to finally break out of the weird American obsession with the idea that it's primarily for kids or it's violent porn. It's already broken out of that in a big way, but I think that cultural idea that is weirdly pernicious in America is going to die its final death in the next decade. Animation is just another form of visual storytelling, and people won't think that much about it.
Well, the old people dying will help with that, right?
Yeah, I think so.
I think
maybe then we'll get more movies like Rango, which did come out this past decade. That movie is not as old as you might remember it as being.
So I don't know what will happen, right? because I don't know too much of like, the industry developments, right? Behind the scenes information upon which you would need to base that kind of prediction. But I can say what I'd like to happen, right? Is I would like to see a cartoon saloon-esque explosion from other countries, right? So
Yes.
we got US, Japan, Ireland, right?
France has always been up there.
Yeah, France has always been there, right? It's like,
Let's see the German animation explosion.
give me the
Let's see the Romanian animation explosion.
right, India, hit us with your animation.
Oh my God. Imagine a decade where Bollywood, like the Bollywood equivalent of anime arises.
You can't tell me there are plenty of filmmakers in India. There are people who can draw in India. Make, you got money. Make a movie, a 90-minute full-length animated feature film, and aim for like Oscar with it when you're making it, right? Do the best you fucking can, right? You can do it. I believe in you. I want to see it. I got my money. Shut up and take it.
Yeah.
Money for you. Brazil could do it too, probably. I think Brazil has done some. GKids, I think, did put out a movie from Brazil. I didn't see it though.
Yeah, there are a lot of great movies animated from all these countries. The difference is they don't get mass releases like in America. They're not widespread. Like they're not known except to people like us who would go to like a film festival to see them.
Well, they're also not the kind of movie that gets from, one country to another like that, at least to here, is something that has like sort of like indie movie theater appeal.
Yeah.
No one's you have to make that. You can make it with the mass appeal, right? Even though it's a foreign film, right? Look what Parasite did, right? It's like you can do it, right? Akira did it, but that was the greatest achievement of animation ever.
Yeah.
So good luck.
But I think honestly, of all the shows that were push the American audience to be more open to all this, honestly, I think it's BoJack. I think that opened some people's eyes in a way that shows should have been able to do, but weren't able to for some reason.
You don't even need to hit the American audience. Just try to hit audience outside of your country, whatever your country is, right? Just, screw stupid Americans, right? It's like if you're, don't try to target any one other place. Just try to make something that anyone in the world will enjoy, right? The other thing I hope to see, but I don't know if we will see, is, and I guess this applies to the video game industry too, but we haven't done 2010s in gaming yet, is some sort of fixing of the animation labor market, where basically if you work, especially in Japan in anime, or I guess other places, you're being paid nothing, working long hours. It's horrible, right?
I do think the animation industry is going to... I think both the animation industry and the video game industry globally are about to hit a brick wall of it is literally impossible to make these things at this scale with our current global economic system.
I would love to see a labor side reckoning and reorganization that way, and then come out on the other side, and that would be the 2020s of, the same way that there was a sort of a, twist up in the late 2000s.
I would like to see that in both animation and games.
Yeah, and every industry.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously, destroy capitalism.
Those are the artistic
capitalism delenda est.
Yeah, that we're focused on that have this problem, right?
So the last thing on a personal note, because we got our start doing anime, like panels and lectures at anime cons, like years before.
They were the easiest to get into because they were small time.
Otakon 2002. If the 2000s was the era of us centering our convention lives and our panel lives and like a lot of stuff around Otakon and going to a lot of anime cons, the 2010s is interesting. In 2009, that was the last Otakon before they kicked us out of off the staff and there was drama. And then we switched to Anime Boston. And we went to Anime Boston every year all the way up to 2016.
Oh, it's a lot longer than I thought. We went to that many Anime Boston.
Yeah, the last Anime Con.
I liked Anime Boston. I had a good time there. I would go to it still if it was not a slight hassle.
Yep.
And it's a really good con.
Yeah, it's a really good con. It's partly that one thing we did is when we first started GeekNights, we leaned heavily into anime, and we got adjacent to a lot of real work in the anime industry in America. We did not pursue that, and we actually doubled down hard over the last decade into video games instead. And that's kind of the main focus of GeekNights, like video games and board games.
Yeah. Well, I think what happened is that we
Well,
had a stockpile of anime that we had seen and comics that we had read already, right? That we could then do shows on. But we were not reading and consuming new ones at a rate at which there were, the rate at which you do Geek Nights episodes, right? I'm not watching, if I do a show every other week, 26 anime series a year, right? Or 26 new animated, if you count movies and TV series and comic series, right? Or just comics in general. I am not reading or watching 26 new ones a year, even if
never mind all the research and reading. Like, part of the reason we were able to do so many things back then, like the old decades, is we did Geek Nights 4 nights a week, and we spent a lot of time on like staying abreast of the global anime industry to be able to speak to it fluently if we're going to give a talk, like research, knowing things. Can't keep that up.
Even do it that much. Other people did it way more than us.
Yeah, and gladly, a lot of the people who were doing podcasts around the stuff in parallel with us, they doubled down on anime and moved into the anime industry. Like Mike Toole, big part of the American anime industry now.
But yeah, it's like, back then I had like 50 anime series I had already seen, so I could do 50 podcasts, right, out of nothing. Now I haven't seen 50 more. Even if I had watched all of the, everything on Crunchyroll, made full use of my Crunchyroll subscription, it's like, still don't know if there would be enough for all these Geek Nights episodes.
But also
a lot of those I'm not going to watch no matter what, right?
But we exhausted all of the low-hanging fruit of things we have, like, accrued knowledge about. Like, the kinds of lectures we could give at anime cons are not that informative to anyone who reads nowadays, because people have caught up. But video gaming, we continue to push forward. We're not really pushing anywhere but gaming right now because we got lives. We're almost 40.
Yeah, well, I think part of what it is also is that, if in any area, right, there's sort of like big things that come out, right? No matter what the area of art or media is. If you're in sports, this is Super Bowl, right? Even if you're like a hockey reporter, Super Bowl is going to enter into your article that week somehow, right? What did the hockey players were watching the Super Bowl, something like that. Who are they betting on? Stuff like that. But for us, it's like, when it comes to anime, there's certain anime series that are like the big anime series. What, like there's some Demon Slayer thing is like the big thing now, something like that?
Well, Attack on Titan is getting its final season.
Okay, but it's like, I guess we watched Attack on Titan when it was new, but it's like, it used to be that we would watch all the big series that came out, even if they weren't our thing. We watched Full Metal Alchemist. We watched,
we would watch shows to completion just to be able to speak to them and like learn about them.
I watched some Naruto, right?
This is a broader trend in Geek Nights as a whole. We used to do reviews of things we didn't like. Like, we give bad reviews of things. We basically only review things we like nowadays because we kind of
spending time on, I'm not watching, I'm not saying these things are bad. I'm saying I haven't seen them, right? But I know there are things that I know exist, are big, and I haven't seen them and probably won't. Like your My Hero Academias, right? Your Demon Slayers, your Borutos, right? All these like huge animes that I know are huge animes that people are talking about a whole bunch. I'm probably never going to watch a single episode of them ever, right? Because I know what they are, and I don't have time for that. But I did have read all of One Punch Man, so that's definitely a 2010s.
Nah.
Bring on the One Punch Man.
But yeah, I think in terms of us, we'll continue to, like, Wednesday will always be animation nights because we still watch a lot of anime and a lot of animation. There's a lot to say, but what we're not doing is I don't think we're going to ever go to anime conventions again. Like, we're not going to be giving lectures at an anime con.
I don't know if I'm going to never go to one again. I just don't think I will be going to one regularly and consistently, right?
We're also not going to go to one and, like, put on a lot of panels and lectures.
If I went to one and didn't put on a bunch of panels and lectures, what would I spend my time doing?
Exactly. There's a whole thing around that of we've sort of backed away from any convention where there's not active doing directly related to the convention.
Yeah. But yeah, you think about other areas, right? It's like video games. I'm not playing the huge video games that I know are huge that everyone's talking about, right? I'm not playing your Cyberpunk.
Well, because plenty of people play them and talk about them, and we focus on other things that are less popular, kind of on purpose.
Tabletop gaming, though, we still are sort of playing the big things, right? We played the Azules. They came out, right? That's big and recent.
Yeah.
It's when there's new big tabletop releases, like we'll play those games, like we'll go to PAX and we'll play them one time and see what the deal is. So I think that's where we can speak to a little more than.
Yeah. Also, just we study gaming more. We focus on it more. We pay attention to the industry more. I pay less attention to the anime industry toward the end of this decade than I did at the start of this decade by a lot.
Yep. Definitely paying less attention.
But yeah, I look forward to this golden
We're paying less attention, yet sort of like enjoying the fruits more, right?
It's like I'm just watching a shit ton of anime and it's all great.
Right. It's like we're spending less time inspecting the bark of the tree and more time just eating fruit. And wow, the tree's making some fucking awesome fruit these days. Let's eat all this fruit. Oh my God.
Yep. Meanwhile, though, in gaming, I'm still like picking apart the bark and chewing on it, putting it under a microscope.
You're eating all the fruit, whereas I'm going to get that best fruit up there and eat just that one.
Well, right now, most of the fruit we're eating is from the train tree.
Well, in the board game area.
Yeah. All right, so here's to a hopefully interesting 2020s.
Yep. Bring on the good stuff.